Hello book nerds, welcome to Bookshelf Bunny. I'm Kim and this is a short review on The Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Okay guys, so I have finished The Fourth Wing. It took me a while to get to it. It's had a lot of hype in the bookish community. And I didn't want to dive into it right away because I wasn't sure if I was going to be horribly disappointed or not. But I did read it, and guys, I loved it. I gave it a 5 out of 5. No kidding. Oh, also my special edition with the black pages is beautiful. It's good. There's my only beef with this book, my only beef, but it wasn't even enough of a beef to take a star away in my rating, was that there's this like whole disclaimer at the beginning of the book about trigger warnings and violence and death and gratuitous activities. And it wasn't that bad. I mean, either that or I'm horribly desensitized. But I felt like that little disclaimer at the beginning has the potential to really amp someone up for this crazy, violent, amazing fantasy story, only to be like, oh, okay, it wasn't that violent or horrible. So again, I'm either very desensitized or because I read a lot of things, or it was just there to create some hype right away as you dive into the story. So that was my only beef with it, was that whole warning at the beginning. That's it. I mean, if you're a fantasy reader, you know that reading a book in a fantasy setting is probably going to come with some violence. I have read some horribly disturbing things that have stuck with me far more than anything in this book from fantasy genres. For example, in the Sword of Truth series, that I think it's the 4th book, Temple of the Winds, maybe not, I don't remember. But there's this scene, there's this torture scene when one of the characters gets hot rats placed on their stomach, and then the pot, the thing on their stomach, there's hot coals placed on top, so it drives the rats down into this. And that was disturbing. That was disturbing. There was nothing quite like that in this. So if you're not a huge fan of violence, it's not that bad. At least I didn't think so. There is some violence in it, but nothing horrible. Nothing horrible. I was thoroughly impressed. It's a spicy read, so there's lots of fun activities between our protagonist and her love interest. It's an enemies to lovers kind of vibe, but it wasn't so spicy that was the plot. And that's what I like in a spicy book. I don't want any of the sexual activity or the sexual tension to be the entire plot of the book, or it just doesn't do it for me. It just doesn't do it for me. I need a story. And if the story happens to have some spice, fine. This was that. I was thoroughly impressed with how they did it. It's definitely raunchy if you're looking for that, but it's not anything that absorbs the whole story, which made me happy. The plot itself was interesting. I like the war college idea. Who doesn't love dragons? I like the fighting for survival every day. Love the enemies to lovers. I was not disappointed. In fact, it ended in such a way that I immediately had to grab Iron Flame and start reading that. I'm like 500 pages into that now. So in the booktube, book talk, bookstagram community, this is a book with a lot of hype, and I think it's worth it. I think it's worth the hype. It wins. It was a 5-star read for me. So I recommend it. Definitely check it out. And even if it's not your vibe, I think you're still going to enjoy the story. Okay, that's really all I got. I am currently filming a vlog today, which you will see probably on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, probably Christmas Day. And that's why I'm all decked out. I'm about to do some baking. So I'm gonna go bake some cookies. I would love to hear from you in the comments. How do you feel about hyped up books in the bookish community? Do you hesitate like me because you're afraid of being horribly disappointed? Or do you just go for it? Let me know. All right, book nerds, that's it for me. And as always, happy reading.